welcome back to another Outdoor Philosophy, and we are continuing our series today on financial freedom. And today we're going to tackle this issue of student loans. Ouch. We are in a weird place in American society. If you guys are in another country, man, you're like, what is wrong with you Americans? Because we are completely strapping our entire students into debt for the rest of their lives. My mother knows somebody who worked with at retirement age still making payments on student loans. I know several people that have debts ranging from $100,000 to $200,000 to $300,000, and that's kind of becoming the norm. Now, I'm a highly educated person. I have an earned doctorate degree, and I spent 10 years in education after high school to earn all that, and I was a professor for a while. And I tell people right now, do not go to college unless it's absolutely required for what you want to do. But then, of course, now in the last about decade or less, then people recognize that people have stopped going to college because it's so crazy out of control with debt that they're doing trade schools, and so now the trade school costs are jacked up. So there's a few things to look at here. One of these is the way that the education system works. It's just costing the students way too much money. There is nothing that justifies paying $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, $4,000, $400,000, $500,000 for an education. Very few people will make enough to make that back in their lifetime. But what ends up happening is we have this conjuncture of schools that can charge whatever they want because the government turns around and gives, loans to all these students that will cover the costs no matter what the costs are. In fact, the town where I live, cost of living is so high in this town because, Penn State main campus is like less than a mile this way. And the prices in this town are so artificially high that it's going to collapse, and it's going to be a bad day for the economy around here when it collapses. But it will collapse because we just can't sustainably keep throwing the money around like this. But let's go ahead and talk about it. First, as far as student loans are concerned, as a student, you move off through high school. As you start moving into high school, then the colleges start getting wind of who you are. And then you start getting marketed all of the colleges to go to. And then, of course, from there, now you're starting to get marketed all the loans. And then you have your private loans, you have your federally insured loans, you have all these. And there's, which one of these is the better one? So let's kind of break these down. First, federal loans. Biggest problem with federal loans. Now, the good thing about them is you're going to get them no matter what. That's maybe a bad thing. But you're going to get the loans. They generally have lower interest rates. The biggest problem with these loans, they are not bankruptable. You can't weasel your way out. The only way to get those loans discharged is you have to become permanently disabled or die. That's the only way to get the loan discharged. Now, because a lot of loan companies are unscrupulous, and they want paid even if you die or become highly disabled, they'll get your parents involved and get your parents as a cosigner. If a parent is a cosigner on your loan and you die or become disabled, that loan will not be forgiven. You have just strapped your parents into paying for an education that you cannot take advantage of because you're dead. That's a problem. Okay. Now, your private student loans, depending on if these are federally insured, so if you just went out to get a loan, and it's not necessarily a student loan, so it's not federally insured, these are bankruptable. Your chances of getting them, though, are pretty much nothing. There's the Parent Plus loans, which is effectively what we talked about before. It's these loans that for your parents take out that if you become dead or disabled, whatever else, hey, they have a parent, so they're not going to forgive it. And so this is a lose-lose situation for the parents and the students. It's a win-win for the banks and for the colleges. So my general take on student loans is it is very difficult, but figure out a way to pay for college. So the last college that I taught at, and this was going back a decade now, but it was very cheap back then. It was maybe $2,000 a semester, which you can work at McDonald's and pay for. And I went to college. And I had to get a student loan initially, but I was kind of smart. So this whole story went like this. My mother forced me to get a loan. There's no gun to my head involved or anything, but the way a mother can make her 18-year-old son do something, you have to do this, you have to, and I remember I signed that stupid papers and then I left and didn't talk to her for 3 days. I was pissed off. So I go off to college and I'm like, I don't want to take out debt. In fact, the funny thing is I had a large mutual fund at the time. I could have paid for college in that. We'll get into that in a minute, if I remember. But I go off to college and we have these loans, and then it's like I'm watching these numbers go up next semester. Oh God, more like, oh God, And it got into the third semester and like, oh, you got to come to the office to get your loan taken care of. I just deleted the email. If I have to go to the office to sign the thing to give me more money, I'm just not going to get more money. And so I said, I went back and said, no, I'm not signing the papers. I said, we're going to finish this with cash. And that's what I did. I worked about 60 to 80 hours a week. During the summer times, I worked up to 80, 2 full-time jobs in the summer times. During the school semesters, I worked anywhere from part-time to part-times up to full-time in the college semesters. I worked really hard. I saved up a lot of cash, and I ended up paying for the remaining, 2.5 years of school. So I get student loans for 3 semesters. And then, of course, when it came time to go to graduate school, I have this philosophy. You can disagree with me if you want, but I have this philosophy that if you're not invited and paid to go to grad school, you don't need to go to grad school. There's a higher thing about that, and that's what I got a complete free ride to grad school. And so I was invited by a couple different programs, and one of them gave us all of our expenses, all of our fees, everything taken care of. We had guaranteed RAs and TAs for 10 years, and so that's what I did. I went into that program, and that's how I earned my doctors. And so there was no loans in there. Now, in the middle of this, some other bad factors got involved. And remember the last series we talked about on the daily walk with the cults? Yeah, that kind of happened. I lost a lot of money, and I'm not going to go into it here, but I ended up getting a little bit of extra student loans just to bridge the gap between what I lost and to finish out the rest of school and to make sure I had a functioning car that would be good. And I had that car for 10 years, which is great. And so with that, then the next thing that I ended up doing is I got a really good professorship right out of grad school. In fact, the last year I was doing grad school in this. Now, mind you, I'm used to living on $1,500 a month in a college town. Like my rent covered over half of that. And now all of a sudden I'm making like, and I got good professorships. Like a lot of your professorships only start at like 30,000. All of mine started at like 50. And so for the first time, I was like, wow, I got a ton of cash. And, I had some bad advice from people that was like, oh, go out and, blow your first check. I ain't blowing my first check. I got debt. And actually, it took me 2 years. I cleaned up every bit of it. And after 2 years' time, I was debt free. And now there's some circumstances that happened involving the major market crash and all these other things that I had to go back into debt to cover some taxes of a lost house. That's the only thing I'm still fighting through, which is very, very small amount, and we're still fighting through that a little bit. But the point of the matter is, do every option you can that do not involve student loans. Give yourself a full-time job to apply for scholarships if you have to go to college. If you're going into trade school stuff, I was talking to some different people in contracting stuff. So if you want to do like electrician or plumbing or things like that, one route is to just go to high school and go to Triangle Tech or some related technical school, pay way more money than you should, and then you get to live as a slave, making only slightly better than a cashier at McDonald's for the next 3 years as you finish your apprenticeships, and then you can take your journeyman's test, and then you can actually make some decent money. But in the meantime, you will not be able to afford anything, and I literally mean it, you better be planning to live in your parents' basement because your loans are going to be too high. But you can get around that by actually working with, you do not actually have to have any of that schooling to work as an apprentice, but you have to have some concept of knowing what you're doing. So if you're going to want to get into that field, you're going to want to study it up, you're going to want to test it out, you're going to want to fix your own faucets, fix your own electrician, know a little bit about it, and then get in there and meet somebody who's willing to take you on as an apprentice. You can work for him as a slave laborer without the debt for 3 years, actually probably be doing decent enough. I mean, we're still slightly better than McDonald's cashiers, so it's not a lot. But then after 3 years, you can take the test without having all that student loan debt because they give you on-the-job training. And that's always the better way to go. So it kind of boils down to use your cognition to figure out what you need to do. Now, the reason I advise people don't go and run off to school right away is because every single thing I do for income right now, I've never had a single course in, nothing. You just have to get out there and learn what you're doing. Between videography, between graphic design, between web design, between marketing, between writing books, between producing books, all of these things that generate income for me, not a single course have I had in any of that kind of stuff. And frankly, I'm doing okay. All right, and that's the thing we need to think about, is that with student loans is a trap. And what they did is they got us thinking for so long that you're going to fail out of life if you don't go to college. And they'll point to all these statistics, and they're completely flawed. And I've talked about that in a different place, so I'm not going to go into it here. But they've convinced you that if you don't go to college, you're not going to succeed. And then they jack up the price of college and then give you free loans. It's a win for the college, it's a win for the bank, and it's a total loss for you. Because I know people who will never pay off their student loans. They will go to the grave with student loans, even assuming they live until they're 70 or 80 years old. That's how bad the crisis is. Avoid student loans at all costs. Avoid them at all costs. Figure out another way. It's got to be creative, but you got to think about it. So thanks for coming along on this outdoor philosophy. Hopefully this was interesting for you. I don't know, a little background on my past, I guess. But let me know what you think about the comments, this in the comments down below.